The rain never stopped in Eldrith 7. It came in sheets, in mist, in fine needles that seeped into broken walls and pooled in shattered courtyards. The colony had once been planned, gridded, alive with trade delegations in orderly districts. Now it was only a carcass of its former self, a maze of dripping corridors where neon strips flickered over rusted stalls. Steam carts hissed in the alleys, filling the air with the scent of boiled roots and damp stone. People moved like shadows through it, bartering, stealing, surviving, never looking too long at anyone else. Here, silence was safer than words. 9 kept her head down as she walked. Her skin green tinged, pale in the cold, was slick with rain. The wrap she wore clung too tightly, its ceremonial weave torn, adhesive bands peeling loose. Once it had been meant for council chambers, a symbol of her heritage, her training, her fluency across 3 interspecies tongues. Now it hung from her body like a broken promise, no more than fabric between her and hunger. Her steps slowed near a vendor's stall. The steam rising from the pot made her chest ache. The smell of broth, heavy with root starch, wrapped around her like a hand, pulling her closer. She lingered too long, her eyes flicking from the bubbling pot to the vendor's face. He saw the hunger. They always did. His expression didn't change, just a subtle nod toward the alley behind his cart. A signal. A practiced exchange. 9s. Throat tightened. She knew what waited there. She had done it before. Not often, but enough. Her stomach cramped hard, reminding her that dignity didn't fill emptiness. Her hands trembled as she moved behind the cart. The alley was narrow, lit by a single blue strip light dangling overhead. Water pooled near the bins, reflecting her shape as she pressed her back to the wall. Her breathing grew shallow, almost mechanical. She pulled at the knot on her shoulder. It resisted at first and came loose with a jerk, the cloth slipping down her side. The damp air hit her skin, sharp and humiliating. She whispered the words as if reciting a ritual she no longer believed in. All I have are my clothes. Just give me food. Her voice was hoarse, brittle with dryness. She didn't cry. She didn't plead. The transaction was supposed to be simple, detached, but footsteps echoed against wet stone. Different from the vendor's shuffle. Heavier. Closer. She froze, cloth half fallen, arms instinctively crossing her chest. She turned, expecting to see another man, ready to take what little she had left. Instead, it was someone she didn't recognize. Human. Lean, unshaven, his jaw shadowed with fatigue. A hood clung to his head, dripping with rain, and storm-gray eyes locked on her, not with hunger, not with cruelty, but something else entirely. He didn't leer. He didn't smirk. He just stopped a few paces away, his boots steady on the slick pavement. Put it back on. The words were quiet, flat, but they struck harder than any shout. 9's breath hitched. Her fingers clutched the fabric, dragging it back across her shoulder. She didn't tie it. She didn't trust her hands not to shake. Her eyes narrowed, defensive. No one ever interrupted. No one cared. But this man, this stranger, put it back on, he said again, softer this time, almost like he was asking for a heartbeat. The rain seemed to fade, the market beyond muted. She stared at him, unable to place what he wanted, what trap he was setting. People didn't stop in Eldrith 7. They walked past, eyes forward, letting desperation rot in silence. Yet here he was, telling her to cover herself. Her throat closed around words that wouldn't come. She held the wrap against her skin, damp and trembling, and for the first time in years, she felt the strange weight of something she had forgotten. Choice. And as the silence stretched between them, broken only by rain and the hum of the light. Strip overhead, 9 realized she wasn't shocked. because he had interrupted. She was shocked because no one had ever told her she didn't have to give herself away. She didn't move. Not yet. The fabric clung awkwardly to her side, her fingers gripping it tight. His eyes didn't leave hers. And for the first time in Eldrith 7, 9 wasn't terrified of being seen. Asterisk, the walk back to his shelter was a blur of shadows and dripping steel. Rowan didn't speak, and 9 didn't dare ask where he was leading her. Every corner they turned, every corridor they passed through, her stomach tightened. Her mind chased itself in circles, whispering the same warning she had learned long ago. Nothing is free in Eldrith. 7. The rain followed them. It slid down the cracked stairwell, leaking through fractured ceilings, pooling in shallow steps where she had to lift her wrap to keep from soaking it further. The silence between them wasn't comfortable. It was thick, coiled, waiting for the inevitable demand to fall. She was ready for it, rehearsing answers, calculating escape routes. Still, she followed. Hunger was stronger than suspicion. Rowan stopped at a rusted door on the 3rd floor of a broken civic building. Its paint had long peeled away, revealing warped alloy beneath. He shoved it open with a shoulder, the hinges groaning in protest. Inside was dim, but not abandoned. A patched solar coil blinked faintly in the corner. A hot plate hissed on a makeshift table. There was a cot against the wall, a crate stacked with spare parts, a folding chair, and a cracked ceramic bowl set beside a kettle dot. It wasn't luxury, but it wasn't ruin either. It was lived in, carefully maintained. He motioned her inside. She hesitated at the threshold, fingers clutching the frayed knot of her wrap. But the smell of heat, the faint trace of dried root broth in the air, pulled her forward. She stepped in, waiting for the door to slam behind her. It didn't. He left it half-closed, as though escape wasn't even something he was thinking about. Rowan pulled a tin container from a shelf and shook out a handful of dried pellets. He poured water into the kettle and set it to boil. The hiss of steam filled the silence. He didn't look at her as he worked, just stirred slowly, patiently, as if she weren't there. 9's eyes scanned the room. No weapons, no chains, no hidden men waiting behind doors. Just one man, moving with the steady rhythm of someone who had done this countless times before. Her throat burned. The hunger clawed at her ribs until it hurt to stand. Still, she refused to ask. She refused to beg again. When the broth was ready, Rowan poured it into a second bowl and slid it across the table toward her. The steam curled upward in the dim light. She didn't sit. She didn't reach. Her eyes flicked between the bowl and his face, searching for the trap, the unspoken condition. "It's just soup," he said quietly. His voice wasn't unkind. It wasn't pity either. Just simple, steady fact. 9's jaw tightened. She moved closer, her fingers brushing the rim of the bowl. The warmth bled into her hands before she even lifted it. She sat at last, the chair creaking under her weight, and cradled the ceramic as if it might vanish. Her lips parted, but no words came. She couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten, without paying for it with something more than scraps. She brought the bowl to her mouth and sipped. The taste was bitter, earthy, almost sour, but it was food. Real food. Her shoulders sagged as the warmth spread through her, loosening something inside her chest. She hadn't noticed her hands had. Stopped shaking until the bowl was nearly half empty. Finally she spoke, her voice low, ragged. "What do you want from me?" Rowan didn't answer immediately. He leaned back against the table, arms folded loosely. His eyes studied her, but not in hunger, in thought. After a moment, he shrugged. "Rest. That's all I want tonight." Her breath caught. She set the bowl down carefully, as if afraid the sound might break whatever fragile truth hung between them. "You think I can just rest?" she asked, I don't care what you think, he said softly. I care if you sleep. He pointed to the cot in the corner. She stared at him, suspicion fighting with exhaustion. He turned away, unrolling a thin mat on the floor for himself. No demand, no claim, no threat. You're not going to try anything? She whispered. No. Her throat tightened. Why not? His eyes flicked to hers, steady as stone. Because you've had enough taken from you already. The silence that followed was heavier than any words. She sat still, her fingers curled tight against the edge of the chair. For the first time in longer than she could remember, her chest ached not with fear, but with something dangerously close to relief. The rain tapped softly against the half-shuttered window. Inside, two strangers lay on opposite sides of a quiet room, one on the cot, one on the floor. The city outside didn't change, but in here, Nine felt something she hadn't allowed herself in years. Not safety. Not yet. But the fragile echo of it. Morning in Eldrith 7 was only different from night in one way. The shadows traded places. The rain had slowed, but the streets below still glistened with a dull gray sheen. Through the half-broken blinds, pale light crept into Rowan's shelter, tracing long lines across the cracked floor. 9 sat on the edge of the cot, the thin blanket wrapped loosely around her. She hadn't slept, not really. Her body had rested, but her mind hadn't stopped listening to the creak of the building's frame, to the faint hum of Rowan's solar unit, to the man breathing steadily on the floor just a few feet away. She kept expecting him to move in. The night, to rise and take what he hadn't demanded. But he hadn't. He hadn't touched her at all. Rowan stirred, his arms sliding from across his chest. He blinked himself awake, eyes heavy but alert, as though sleep was never something he trusted either. He sat up, stretching stiffly, then glanced at her. You don't sleep, he said. She flinched at the sound of his voice. Not well. He pulled a shirt from beside his mat and tugged it on. Bathrooms through the back, he muttered, nodding toward a cracked doorway near the corner. Water pressure's trash, but it works. 9 hesitated, then rose slowly, clutching, her wrap tighter around her shoulders. The bathroom was barely more than a cubicle, with a pipe faucet, a cracked mirror, and a basin stained from years of use. Still, when the first trickle of water wheezed from the pipe, she cupped her hands and splashed her face. The cold shocked her, cleared her head. She scrubbed her arms, her neck, and finally untied the wrap, letting it fall. For a long moment she stared at herself in the mirror. Her ribs were sharper than she remembered. Her collarbones jutted like rails. The green hue of her skin had dulled, pale in places, almost sickly. She touched her cheek and felt the hollow beneath it. The ceremonial cloth pooled at her feet like a shed skin. When she stepped back into the main room, her hair was damp and braided loosely over one shoulder. The wrap was retied, tighter now, still clinging uncomfortably to her frame. Rowan didn't look up from the terminal he had powered on. He poured broth into 2 cups and slid one toward her as she sat. For a while, silence held between them, the soft buzz of the terminal filling the space. 9 finally spoke, her voice lower, calmer than last night. You said you catalog atmospheric data. I recover it, he corrected. Most of the terminals are dead, but some still hold backups. I pull what I can. For who? She asked. He paused. Don't know anymore. Contracts used to come through the preservation office. Maybe they still do. I upload to a core station when I can. Doesn't matter if anyone reads it. 9 studied his face. You do this for nothing? Rowan sipped from his cup. Nothing. It keeps me alive. She turned her gaze to the terminal. Faint green text blinked across its dull screen. Old code structures she recognized. Her chest tightened. You're nesting the wrong directory, she said quietly. He looked up. What? You're treating a terminal stack like a data block. It'll loop. Rowan blinked, leaning back. You read this stuff? She looked down at her hands. I translated it, before the collapse. He gestured toward the chair beside him. Then sit. For a moment she hesitated. Then she stood, crossed the room, and lowered herself into the chair. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard before moving with surprising confidence. She navigated the old architecture with ease, correcting his pathing, rerouting dead relays, flagging redundant logs. Her movements were precise. Practiced. Rowan leaned against the table, watching. You weren't just a translator. Her jaw tightened. I was supposed to be a diplomat. Raven Station, Council Hall, but the funding was cut. We were dismissed. He didn't interrupt. I couldn't afford passage out. My clearance lapsed. My stipend ended. I came here to wait for transfer paperwork. His brow furrowed. How long ago? She kept her eyes on the terminal. 5 years. That silence returned, heavier now, filled with unspoken truths. 5 years was too long. Whatever she had been waiting for had died with the collapse. Rowan finally spoke, his voice even. You're good at this. You want to help again tomorrow? Nine's throat tightened. She glanced at him, unsure if he meant it. Slowly she nodded. That evening, she sat on the floor, legs folded under her, the oversized coat he had lent her, draped across her lap. Her ceremonial wrap hung over a pipe vent, drying in the faint heat. She caught him looking at it, then at her. I should throw it away, she said. It's not useless, he replied. Then what is it? Proof. He said. She frowned. Proof of what? That you survived. Her throat closed around a dozen things she couldn't say. Instead, she pulled the coat tighter around her shoulders, the fabric still holding his warmth. For the first time, she didn't feel like someone trading her body to survive. For the first time in years, she felt almost human again. The night cycle came quietly, as if even the broken city outside had grown weary of itself. Eldrith 7 never truly slept. Its ruins hummed with failing generators, rattling pumps, the murmur of traders gambling in the shadows. But inside Rowan's shelter, the air was still. 9 sat by the terminal, staring at lines of faint green code scrolling across the cracked screen. She wasn't really reading. Her mind was elsewhere. Her ceremonial wrap, now clean and dry, hung folded on the wall hook. For years it had been her only possession, her armor and her burden, her currency and her shame. Tonight she didn't reach for it. Instead, she wore one of Rowan's patched shirts, its hem brushing her thighs, its sleeves rolled past her elbows. It was far too big for her, but it felt different. It felt like a choice. Rowan sat at the table, tinkering with a corroded circuit board under the dim glow of a lamp. He hadn't spoken much, and neither had she. Silence used to frighten her. It used to mean waiting for someone else to decide her fate. But now it lingered with a different weight. Not oppressive, curious, expectant, alive. She caught herself watching him. The lines in his face were sharp, worn down by years of solitude. Yet there was a steadiness in him that unsettled her more than violence ever had. He didn't act like the others in Eldrith. He didn't try to own her silence. He let it exist. Finally, she broke it. Why did you stop me? He didn't look up from the board. Because you didn't want to do it. Her jaw tightened. You don't know what I want. Now he did look at her. His gray eyes met hers without flinching. I know what it looks like when someone is cornered. And I know what it looks like when someone still has fight left. You weren't done yet. The words lodged deep inside her, sharper than she expected. She turned away, staring at the floor. You think I'm strong? I think you're still here, he said simply. That's enough. She wanted to argue. She wanted to call him naive, but the part of her that had whispered all I have. My clothes last night had gone quiet. Later, when the lamps dimmed and the room shifted into a softer shadow, she moved toward the cot. Rowan spread his mat out again on the floor. She watched him, hesitating at the edge of the bed. "You're not going to try anything," she said again. More statement than question. Double quotes? No. Double quotes. Her voice dropped. "Why not?" "Because you'd hate me for it," he answered. She tightened the shirt around herself. Something inside her cracked, a fracture so deep she hadn't even known it was there. For years, her body had been a debt, a weapon, a curse. She had given it away to stay alive, convinced that was all it was worth. Now here was a man who refused to take it, even when she offered nothing else. Her throat tightened, and the words came out before she could stop them. "Will you touch me, Rowan?" He stilled. His hand froze on the mat, his shoulders tense. Slowly, he turned to look at her. "Only if it's not a trade." "It's not," she whispered. The air between them shifted. She crossed the floor barefoot, stopping within reach of him. He didn't move, not until she did. Her hand trembled as it brushed against his, and he let her. When his fingers finally touched her face, it wasn't to claim or to take. It was to ask. A question, wordless, but heavy. She leaned into it, closing her eyes. For the first time in years, her skin didn't crawl beneath someone else's touch. Rowan leaned forward, his forehead resting gently against hers. The silence in the room pulsed like a heartbeat. Not dangerous. Not suffocating. When his lips met hers, it wasn't a bargain. It wasn't survival. It was permission. Later, as they lay together on the cot, her head resting against his shoulder, Nine felt something break free inside her. The hunger was still there, the scars hadn't vanished, and the city outside was still merciless. But for the first time, since she had been left behind, she wasn't a transaction. She wasn't surviving for anyone else's terms. She belonged to herself. And Rowan, staring up at the ceiling with her curled against him, knew he hadn't rescued her. He'd simply given her back what had been stolen. Choice. And in the dark, with the rain soft against the window, that was enough. The next morning came with a different kind of silence. Not the hush of rain dripping through broken ceilings, but something heavier, an absence that made Rowan stir before his body was ready. He sat up on the mat, the ache of poor sleep in his shoulders, and scanned the room out of habit. Nine was already awake. She sat by the terminal, knees drawn up beneath the oversized shirt, her hair loose and damp from another wash. The ceremonial wrap still hung on the wall hook, untouched. She wasn't looking at him. Her eyes were fixed on the screen, its dull green glow reflecting against her skin. Rowan frowned. "You've been up long?" Her voice was distant. "I couldn't sleep." He pushed himself to his feet and crossed the room. "What's wrong?" She didn't answer at first. Her finger hovered over the blinking cursor, then tapped a line of code. "This doesn't belong." He leaned over her shoulder. On the screen was a file header that didn't match the others. Too clean. Too recent. "That's not atmospheric data," she said. Her voice had gone low, strained. Rowan scrolled. The entry resolved into a registry tag. Partial. Fragmented. But clear enough to see. Alan Zaini, female hybrid, unverified ID, *9's throat constricted. She read it twice before she whispered, "That's me." The timestamp glowed beneath. It just 3 weeks old. Asterisk. Her hands went rigid on the table. For a moment, the room tilted. She wasn't invisible. She hadn't disappeared into Eldrith 7 like she thought. Someone somewhere had seen her, had flagged her. Rowan straightened, jaw tight. "Survey drone," he muttered. "Low level, probably automated." "That doesn't matter." she snapped. Her eyes darted to the window, the blinds, the cracked corners of the room. It saw me. It sent my name. Someone will find it. They won't, Rowan said. You don't know that. His voice rose, then steadied again, calm but firm. I do. Those flags sit in system backlogs no one reads. They only matter if someone pushes them. And no one's watching Eldrith 7. 9 turned on him, her hands trembling. You can't know that. He met her gaze. He didn't flinch. I know enough. Her chest heaved. The panic that had been buried under food and warmth and choice came roaring back. For 5 years she had been forgotten, erased. Now, one blinking line on a terminal threatened to unravel it all. Rowan shut down the feed. He severed the uplink, scrubbing the metadata with quick, practiced motions. The green cursor blinked, then died. There, he said. Gone. 9's voice dropped, almost a whisper. Not gone. Somewhere it's still there. In a cache. In a relay. Waiting. Rowan pulled a chair beside her, but didn't touch her. You can leave if you want. If it feels safer. She turned, her eyes flashing with something between anger and fear. And go where? You think there's anywhere I can go with no ID, no credits, no record, but that? He didn't answer. His silence was its own admission. Her breathing slowed, not calm, but deliberate. She pressed her palms flat on the table, grounding herself. Then her voice came steadier. I don't want to leave. Rowan exhaled, long and low, some tension. Leaving his frame, then stay. She stared at him, unsure whether he understood the weight of what he'd said. Stay, not survive. Not hide, stay. Her eyes returned to the blank terminal. The reflection of her face stared back at her, pale and thin, but no longer hollow. The line of her name still burned in her mind, a reminder she couldn't erase. She wasn't invisible anymore, but she wasn't alone either. That night, when the lights dimmed, she didn't ask him to hold her. She simply crawled into the cot and folded herself beneath his arm as though it belonged to her. Rowan didn't move. He didn't ask. He understood. The ping might still be out there, blinking in some forgotten satellite, but for the first time in years, 9 chose not to run. And Rowan chose to let her. Outside, Eldrith 7 slept restlessly. Inside, 2 survivors lay in the dark, knowing the world hadn't finished with them. But this time, if it came, they would face it together. Asterisk, the rain hadn't returned, but the cold had. It crept through the concrete, soaked the metal joints of the building, and lingered like a ghost beneath every breath. Rowan was sealing a window gap with scrap polymer when the knock came. 3 times. Not rushed, not hesitant, just deliberate. He froze. So did 9. She was at the table, sorting worn tools into piles, those that worked, those that needed work, and those beyond saving. Her eyes lifted to meet his. Rowan moved to the door quietly, careful not to let the floorboards creak. He peered. Through the side cam he'd installed, old, analog, cracked on one side but still functional. A woman, human, mid-40s maybe. No uniform, no weapon, just grease-stained clothes and a maintenance badge stitched onto her shoulder. He opened the door a crack. Yeah? The woman didn't flinch. Grid team. Checking linkages. Her voice was flat, tired. We thought. The power draw from this block was dead. You've got solar reserve? Rowan hesitated. Some. She didn't press, just nodded. Surprised no one's taken it yet. They don't know it's here? A small, humorless smirk tugged at the corner of her mouth, then faded. 3 floors down. Girls living in a trash chute. Sick. Half Allen. Doesn't speak standard. Someone said she's not eating. Thought, if you had heat. Rowan didn't reply. I'm not asking you to rescue her, the woman said. Just, someone once did the same for another girl. Maybe you know what that means. She turned and left. Rowan stood there for a moment, staring at the door even after it clicked shut. When he turned, 9 was already on her feet. "You're going to help her?" she said. Not a question. "I don't know yet." She took 2 slow steps forward. "Yes, you do. You're already figuring out how." His jaw clenched. "I barely held it together when it was just me. Then you came and changed everything. Now if I open that door again, you won't close it." He met her eyes. Neither spoke. Then 9 stepped closer, her fingers sliding into his hand. "She's like me," she whispered. Rowan looked down. "She might not want to come." Then we wait. That night, they went down together 2 thermal pads, a makeshift heater coil, and 3 sealed ration packs bundled into a scavenged sling. The chute wasn't hard to find. A narrow crawl space, foul with the smell of rot and stagnant water. The girl was curled in the far corner, too small for her age, her skin a sickly greenish yellow. Her white hair was tangled, clumped to one side of her face. She didn't move when they approached. She didn't speak. Her eyes opened barely and fixed on 9, not Rowan, only her. 9 knelt beside her slowly, carefully, like she was approaching a wounded animal. She unwrapped the heater pad and slid it beneath the girl's body. Then she opened a squeeze tube of broth and touched it to the child's lips. No resistance. No sound, but she drank. 9 stroked the girl's hair from her eyes. "You're not alone anymore." The girl blinked, and for a heartbeat, just one, there was a flicker in her expression, recognition, maybe even trust. They carried her back in silence. Rowan opened the door, and for the second time in his life, someone crossed that threshold cold and starving. Not knowing what waited on the other side, they wrapped her in foil and blankets. Rowan checked her breathing while 9 cleaned her. Face with warm water. She didn't speak all night. She didn't cry. She didn't sleep deeply either. But she didn't flinch when touched. That was enough. Rowan turned off the data terminal for the first time in days. The room went dim. The silence was thick. "She's going to stay?" he said. 9 touched his chest gently. "I know. This place won't feel like ours anymore." "No," she whispered. "It'll feel like something new." And for the first time since Eldrith 7 fell, something inside that broken building grew. Not from desperation, not from survival. But from kindness that had once been given freely and now was given again. The heater coil hummed softly as the girl slept, wrapped in layers of warmth she didn't have to earn. And in the stillness, 9 watched her sleep. Not afraid, not questioning, just watching, because someone had once done the same for her. And now it was her turn. The storm had broken over Eldrith 7 2 nights earlier, sweeping grit from the southern ruins into the sky. Dust clung to every surface, dulling windows, coating lungs. But inside Rowan's shelter, the air was warmer. Now, different. The girl lay wrapped in thermal layers near the wall vent, her breathing steadier than when they'd first found her. She hadn't spoken much, barely a word, but her eyes followed movement now. She reached for 9's hand when broth was offered, clung to it when sleep pressed in. Her name came one night, whispered so faintly, Rowan almost didn't hear it. Lara, no surname, no origin. Just 3 letters carried like a secret. 9 repeated it softly, as though saying it might keep the girl anchored. Days passed. 9 no longer wore the ceremonial wrap. It stayed folded neatly on a shelf, untouched, like a relic of another life. Instead, she patched Rowan's shirts to fit her frame, a fabric stitched with scraps of linen. Rowan brought home an old mattress dragged from a half-collapsed infirmary. He set it down beside the cot without explanation. "You're kicking me out?" 9 asked, half smiling. "No," Rowan said, smirking faintly. "She deserves better." Then the floor. That night, Lyra curled onto the mattress, her small hand gripping Nine's until she fell asleep. Rowan watched from the cot, his face unreadable. "She's going to stay," he said quietly. Nine didn't hesitate. "You already knew that." Rowan's eyes flicked toward her. "You want to raise a child here? In this place?" "I want to raise a child with you," she answered. No hesitation. No shame. Just truth. Rowan lay back slowly, staring at the cracked ceiling. For a long while, he said nothing. Then his hand found hers across the space between them. "You didn't touch me when I was starving," she whispered. "That was the day I knew." Silence stretched, but this time it wasn't empty. It was peace. The next morning, Rowan powered on his terminal for the first time in a week. He queued a data load to the Haven core. For once, it wasn't atmospheric records or sensor logs. It was one line of text. "This node is no longer active. The records you seek remain here, but they belong to us now." Then he severed the uplink. Permanently. That evening, the three of them stood on the narrow balcony. Rowan's coat draped over Nine's shoulders, her arm around Aura. A storm cloud rolled over the horizon, dark but distant. The air smelled of rust and wet stone, but the silence in the room behind them carried no threat anymore. Nine tilted her head toward Rowan, her voice low. "I've been waiting." For what? For the silence to stop feeling dangerous. He leaned down, his forehead resting against hers. "Does it still?" She shook her head. "Now it feels like permission." She kissed him then, without fear, without bargain. Just choice. Later, when they lay together on the cot, Lyra asleep nearby, Rowan traced a hand along Nine's arm. Her skin was no longer drawn tight from hunger, no longer trembling. She guided his hands where she wanted them, steady and sure. Every touch. Asked a question, and every answer came from her dot. It wasn't survival anymore. It wasn't trade. It was living. When it was over, she rested her head against his chest, her breath even, her voice almost a whisper. "I feel like I'm mine again." "You always were," Rowan said. "You just needed time to remember." She smiled against his skin, eyes closing. For the first time in years, she slept deeply. Not as prey, not as survivor, but as someone finally whole. Rowan stayed awake longer, listening to the storm outside. In the corner of the room, the terminal sat dark, severed from the network. But upstream, somewhere in a satellite cache, her name still existed. A fragment. A flag. Waiting. He didn't tell her. Instead, he wrapped his arms around her and the child nearby, letting the silence fill the room. For now, Eldritch 7 was still broken. The galaxy beyond it was still watching. But inside this one apartment, in the fragile warmth of found family, something stronger than survival had begun. If anyone came looking, this time, Nine would not face them alone. The end.